Hello, this is Gary Gomes with Jyotish Week. I'm trying to put myself in the frame of an old-time news broadcaster with that introduction. I'm going to talk with you about Vedic astrology, what it means to you, what it means to the world, and how it interconnects with events that are happening throughout the world and your life. So this week, I'll talk a little bit about the. I was asked to talk about Kali Yuga, and I'll explain what that term means to those of you who aren't familiar with it in a few minutes. And I'll also talk about the eclipse, the upcoming eclipse, the Hindu New Year coming right on the tail of the eclipse. And also, I'll try to straighten out this collar so it looks a little bit less disheveled. I can never quite be neat looking, can I? Okay. So, all right. There we go. Okay. Better, not perfect. And so, so, uh, I also like to let you know that you can contact me for readings or for lessons by texting me at 508-525-0001, or again, that's 508-525-0001. And my email address is garygomesg@gmail.com. So the first thing also, if I could ask you a favor to subscribe, refer the channel to friends, and also let me know topics you'd like me to discuss. I'd be happy to do it. I do have those two additional broadcasts that were taped previously coming up shortly, but we'll get to those probably over the next week or so. And let's see now, planning on doing some interviews with some people about retrograde planets and what they mean. And so the first topic I'll talk about is the Kali Yuga. Okay, so essentially, there's this thought, or this not thought, this uh, doctrinaire belief that uh, the Earth's ages are divided up into times of uh, darkness and light, and Kali Yuga is considered to be a relatively dark time. It's supposed to last, at least according to most traditional Hindu thought, it's supposed to last for millions of years, or at least hundreds of thousands of years, excuse me. And that's traditional. Um, that's the more traditionally held position. And it was supposedly it started, I believe, with the death of one of the avatars. I think Krishna, with the death of Krishna in 3102 BCE. That's the date I seem to recall. Now, so that means we're actually pretty early on it lasts for hundreds of thousands of years even. We're pretty early on in the Kali Yuga, so we're not going to see an age of enlightenment or even an increasingly positive age for really several hundred thousand years. And it goes through four stages. There's we would call a bronze or a copper age, um, which is a longer age than the Kali Yuga. And then we go into a silver age. Uh, so and so that's so I believe it's to a Para Yuga, Treta Yuga. Then oh, what's the last one? God, It's a golden age. My apologies. I'm just drawing a mental blank. And so so these ages last really for eons, you know. And essentially the entire cycle is um, we start over here and we dip, and the Kali Yuga is the most difficult age. And as we come out of it, people get better. They live longer lifespans. They get basically um, society becomes nicer and less violent. Okay, so that's the majority position. I'm a I'm a priest of the Kriya Yoga tradition, and Kriya Yoga essentially there was an important Swami in Kriya Yoga called Sri Yukteswar. Um, you may know Paramahamsa Yogananda. He was his guru. Yukteswar was Yogananda's guru, and Yukteswar was also an astrologer. And Yukteswar believed that uh, because we were in a dark age, the Kali Yuga was miscalculated. It was made much longer than it should have been. So he believed we were actually coming out of the Kali Yuga, I would say around the 1800s. We're sort of in a transitional phase right now between an Iron Age or a Kali Yuga age, an age of darkness. And so around 1500, we got coming out of an age of darkness and emerging into our enlightened age. Now, this doesn't mean that all of a sudden everybody's going to be uh, gifted. The benefit of the Kali Yuga for spiritual aspirants is because everybody is so nasty and everybody is so low, it's considered to be the easiest stage in which to gain enlightenment. Okay, so there are less obstacles, there are less reasons to be held to this earthly plane. And the progress, spiritual progress, if you want to make a lot of spiritual progress, you ask to be born during a Kali Yuga. So for spiritual aspirants, the long-term Kali Yuga is actually quote unquote good news because you can liberate from reincarnation relatively easily. I'm not saying it's a walk in the park, but relatively easily. The other ages, it becomes increasingly difficult because more people are better. Just basically, they're nicer, they're more spiritual. So there are there's more competition for the same number of seats. Let's put it that way. Okay. If we go into Yukteswar's calculations, we're actually entering a period in which technology improves. This is sort of consistent with the next yuga and the next stage up. Lifespan increases, which we have seen, and it's estimated by the end of around 2100, the lifespan will be around 120 years, which is one of the benchmarks. Um, and um, and and basically, so he makes an argument which I find compelling that we're actually sort of out of at least the worst phases of the Kali Yuga and towards an ascending cycle. So we have a lot of technological developments. It still binds us to Earth. It's still, it's still kind of stupid in terms of how we use things. But basically, people are getting better. Now, depending on your perspective, you may agree or disagree with that. You may say, "Oh no, we're worse. We're destroying the planet. We're doing all these other things, which are really something um, which is not consistent with um, coming out of a Kali Yuga." And you may have a point, but we're also getting smarter about understanding our world, understanding how the universe functions, even understanding things like how a spiritual life can be beneficial to health. So I tend to fall on Yuktesvar's side, and uh, I opt for um, the viewpoint that we're actually improving a bit. We're actually getting a bit better. Time will obviously tell, which side is right or wrong, and that doesn't mean that there won't be setbacks uh, or displays of anger or aggression or wars as we come out of a Kali Yuga. It doesn't mean if you come out of a Kali Yuga, it doesn't mean all wars are banished. Obviously, we've had some horrific wars during the 20th century and into the 21st century. So obviously, we're not out of that cycle just yet. Um, but I I'm guardedly optimistic that they were moving. That's my own personal belief system. All right. So so again, like I said, early stages of I believe it's a Dvapara Yuga. And so essentially on an upward incline. It takes a while. You're not going to see this, a lot of these developments happen, but basically, um, even in terms of like, let's say, just to use a stupid example, the pace at which computers have evolved over the past 60 years has been breathtakingly fast. Okay. Uh, the, the innovations in medicine have been breathtakingly quick over the past 150 years or so. There are still some things that we don't know a lot about, obviously. Okay, but we're moving into an era of um, space exploration. Now, again, we still have a lot of problems on the Earth. Obviously, we have poverty, we have wars, we have um, uh, a lot of educational issues uh, around the world, not just in the United States. So again, um, it's it's a slow progress. It's a slow, but again, like I said, I'm more optimistic. If you're spiritually inclined, you probably want this Kali Yuga to stick around for a bit longer because, again, like I said, spiritual liberation is easier during a Kali Yuga. But uh, we'll see what happens. But like I said, that's my perspective. Okay. So I tend to favor Yuktesvar's vision more so than the traditional vision. It doesn't mean I think the traditional folks are wrong. It's just from my perspective, from the evidence I've seen. All right, so let's go on to the world map. I don't have a lot of time to do, so let me just see if I can pull it out and put it up on the screen for you, or pull it up rather. You know. So I kind of merged the New Year and the eclipse map together. That's the old, because they're so close this year. It'll take me a little bit of time to find. I'm sorry, folks. Oh, okay, I keep coming up with let me pull the eclipse chart. It'll take me a second. Did have this chart up before. I apologize. Just a second. Second, folks. Okay, so it's March 30th, 2025. Um, so I'm going to answer that. So we'll get this quickly. Okay, so let's start on March 29th, 4:27 p.m. Same day as the eclipse. Sorry to keep you waiting, folks. I thought I had this already lined up. Apparently I didn't. Um, 7 p.m. And I just use Delhi, India as a default location. use New Delhi. Okay. And again, because it's so close to the eclipse chart, let me look at the eclipse chart too. Thanks for your patience. Right. And the eclipse chart will be most active in Canada, southeastern Canada and northeastern Canada, Greenland, northeastern United States, all the way down to Washington, D.C., and up through touching on South America and Puerto Rico, and also, let me see now, and also touching Northwest Africa, Spain, England, Ireland, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia, and most of Europe. Okay, so that's where the biggest effects will be felt. So it's essentially the swath that cuts really yeah um, northern Atlantic Ocean, but it doesn't reach down as far as, let's say, it reaches down as far as uh, Guyana and a little bit of Brazil and intersects with Puerto Rico and sort of cuts into uh, Libya and um, I believe it's Ghana in Africa and all the way up into Morocco, Spain, England, Ireland, Norway, the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, and Europe. So those are the places where we should expect to see the most disruption in government. Um, it starts March 29th um, at 8:50 a.m. March 29th, 8:50 a.m. and March 29th. And I'll use the UK. Around 9:14 a.m. Okay, you want to use Greenwich. Thanks for your patience, and I'll show you both charts. So this is going to be really, really rapid analysis. So let me just go back to Zoom, share the charts with you. Here. All right. All right. So this is, if it shows up, it does show up. Okay. This is the New Year's chart, taken from India, and this is the eclipse chart. So we flip the charts. This is the eclipse chart from the UK. So the only difference between the two is really the rising sign. Okay, um, so basically, we have um, for the eclipse chart, we have Mars in the first house aspecting Ketu as Saturn, and we have a cluster of planets in the 10th house. So the eclipse chart, to me, what this represents is really a shift in governments. And I've been talking about this for a long time. And again, the apogee of that, or not the apogee, the apex of that will come, I would say around April 15th. Um, One of the things that's interesting to me is the eclipse chart focuses on northeastern United States, Canada, and there's a lot of tension between those two countries right now uh, regarding a lot of the policies set up set up by Trump. And Canada has acceded to the United States um, to restore electrical service just recently. But there'll be contention between those countries as well over the next few months. Um, and also the other countries, so Puerto Rico is going through some changes in government. The United States is involved in conflicts over government, especially in Washington, D.C., and especially in the northeastern parts of the country, because the Northeast is mostly um, liberal, it's mostly Democratic, and they'll have essentially the most resistance. It doesn't mean that people from other parts of the country won't be affected, but they'll feel the need to fight. There have been increasing attacks on Tesla facilities across the country. There have been fire explosions. We'll look at this week's chart just to see what's causing that. But this week's chart isn't very different from the eclipse chart, just to be truthful with you. The only difference is really that the eclipse chart is the moon is and sun are together in the eclipse chart. And right now the moon is, I think it's down here somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. If we go to the um, if we go to the New Year chart, which is what I find interesting. So we can expect over the next 6 months, I would say, a fair degree of violence, a fair degree of civil unrest, a fair degree of disruption, especially because of the Rahu Sun conjunction in this sign. So essentially, I've been saying there's a lot of dissatisfaction with institutions, with existing institutions. I think you'll see people actually acting on that in certain countries. I know that there have been election issues in Romania. There is civil unrest in England right now, in the UK right now. There's civil unrest in a lot of countries, especially in Europe right now. Germany has just taken a really um, unusual move in that it's used in outgoing Congress to pass a bill to um, cut to increase the deficit so it can increase defense spending and also so it can fund other projects which Germany has normally been reluctant to do. And so that should increase inflationary pressures. There have been increasing uncertainty given that Rahu and Ketu combination over tariffs and also over trade. But so far, Venus being in this exalted sign hasn't caused outright panic. In a lot of countries, there's a lot of concern, obviously, but also there's a lot of lying going on around how, from both sides, again, I try to be fair about this stuff from both sides as to what they see as being the possible outcomes of this. Evidence from economists or from Wall Street indicates there is not fear of a recession right now. So that's something which maybe will make people feel a little bit less anxious over the next few weeks. There's not evidence from the financial markets that there's fear of a recession, although they have been a bit jumpy. There's not fear from the Fed that they're worried about a recession. So those are things you can perhaps have some faith in. After April 15th, I think the level of anxiety it will ramp up between now and April 15th. But after April 15th, I think you'll see more people inclined towards acts of violence from the left in the United States, maybe from the right, I don't know. There were reports I read about that there were a suspicious number of Teslas being bought in Canada in order to, and it looks like in order to take advantage of the carbon tax, which Canada is ruling out. But the new Canadian Prime Minister has essentially engaged in, there's a new Canadian Prime Minister, and he's essentially engaged in what I would call a shadow play. So he essentially removed a tax. Uh, he zeroed it out, which is essentially the same as removing it, but it's still on the books. So basically, that tax could be raised again. Ultimately, I think it was the carbon tax in Canada. Canada has a carbon tax. Um, and it's really, I think, one of the few countries in the world that does. So I'm not criticizing the Canadians. I'm just pointing out at least what I understand to be factual. This is the New Year's chart. So basically, there'll be some confusion about finances throughout most of the year, some hidden conspiracies, especially connected with money and control, because all these planets are in the eighth house. Um, and again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do know that Europe is doing certain things which are, uh, I would say, are a bit suspect. So is the United States, if I'm honest about it. And Saturn is in the seventh house. So this can mean um, some internal violence in a lot of countries. I know that Turkey had just imprisoned the mayor of Istanbul, who was essentially the favorite to win the election for president. And Romania just had an election essentially, or they had an election candidate arrested. So this is similar to what's happening in Turkey. Um, and Germany also stated outright that if certain candidates were, or that a certain party was to gain power, the AfD, I believe it was, um, that the election would have to be thrown out. And this suggestion came from the European Union, I believe. But I think it also came internally from Germany. Um, the other thing is, we have a lot of countries who are um, still suffering financially. Europe, in particular, is suffering financially because of migration, because of illegal immigration. And they're in a similar situation to the United States in that um, they'll have to readjust their budgets in order to allow the same level of social services while increasing military spending, which the United States has been sponsoring for years. So this doesn't mean the European Union nations have not been spending any money on national defense, but they've been spending relatively small amounts. That does give you a little bit more of an option to spend money on things like healthcare, universal healthcare, plus tax rates. I've looked at tax rates in Europe, and there's in some countries they're marginally higher than the United States. In other countries, they're almost twice as high as they are in the United States. So, um, and the price of gasoline in England is around, I would say, roughly four times what it is in the United States. So there's a very big disconnect between, or there are some very big economic problems hitting Europe right now. So a lot of these will come to a boiling point over the next year or so. Now, again, do they have problems? Do they have racial problems? Of course they do. It's a European country, but most countries around the world have racial problems. This is not unique to Europe. The thing that's unique about Europe was that Europe actually benefited from colonies and colonization and even the World Education, where the World Economic Forum and other agencies in Europe still benefit from colonial possessions like France does. So it's a complicated situation, but uh, but essentially this is it's not the first time it's hitting these countries. It's not the first time it's hitting Canada, but it's hitting them more strongly than it has since the 1990s, when Germany had to take in East Germany and figure out a way to um, make that state, integrate that state into the larger German Republic. And also, we had financial crises in 2000s in Europe based upon governments overspending, and they were also affected by the financial crisis in the United States in 2007. So a lot of these things are interconnected and interrelated, but the public over here, the sun-moon combination out here indicates increasing attempts to suppress the public, basically over the next year. This will be true not only in India, but around the world. And also, I've heard more people in Europe doubling down on restrictions on free speech, essentially free speech not being that important to them. It's more important to support a multicultural community than it is to support free speech. So these are interesting developments. And you're also seeing more pressure from the current United States administration on protesters. And while I can argue both sides of the issue, I'm just describing the general environment we find ourselves in right now. So I'm not expecting any of those things to go away. Pisces is also um, essentially what I would call our core spiritual values, or the things that we um, most adhere to at the end of the day, our essential belief systems. So you will see a surge in religious interests, but also scandals coming out of religious institutions, and many more scandals coming out of government, to be quite honest with you, over the next year or so. A lot of countries have been spending money for things that most people don't want. I'm not even going to say what those things are, but just basically things that are of little or no interest to the average citizen. And whether or not those things are just or not, um, there will be, especially when Saturn moves into this house, a restriction on those things. Saturn will tend to put the kibosh on a lot of that spending, not only in the United States, but also in Canada and in Europe and in Australia and New Zealand and even in China. So I think uh, we're kind of heading towards a readjustment in the way we view things. You're going to see a much more practical world over the next couple of years, a much more technologically driven world, a much more financially driven world over the next couple of years with Saturn and Pisces. Now, the positive side to this is you'll see a lot more technological innovation. The downside is you'll see more potential for illnesses and more potential for epidemics and more potential for uh, um, unseating of existing governments. It doesn't mean that every existing government will be voted out of office, but this has been part of a general wave that's hit the planet for the past 10 years or so. And it'll hit its peak over the next few months, and you'll see an effort at rebuilding after July of this year. I'm not anticipating any really big wars. Okay, so for those of you who are afraid of a war developing, like a world war developing out of either Ukraine or Israel, I don't think that's in the cards. Obviously, I could be wrong, but I Jupiter's not in the right positions to do that. Um, we'll know within a couple of weeks whether or not Jupiter in Taurus actually does trigger a war. Because that has been one of my fellow astrologers has identified that as a tipping point when Jupiter at around 23 degrees, which is not far from right now. It'll start a war. 23 degrees of Taurus will start a war. So we'll see whether or not that actually happens. So this will be a good test case coming up. But if we look at it, I just want to look at the world map for um, the new year just quickly, and then I'll switch to this week. Yeah, I'll look at individual signs for these two charts next week. Hold on a second. The other examples, time space change. So I'm expecting the most activity to be happening. So there's some activity, governmental scandal happening near Hawaii and um, Western Canada, Hawaii, Alaska, and Western Canada, and also some conflict happening up through New Mexico all the way into uh, Minnesota and into the middle of Canada. And we have a Jupiter line running through Massachusetts down into Dominican Republic and Haiti and into Venezuela, so and down into Chile and Argentina. So we can expect some adjustments in those countries' economies and also in Peru. Um, I would say positive adjustments, actually, to be truthful. We have a Saturn line running through uh, one of the Guyanas and down into Paraguay and Uruguay. And there's a lot of activity in Brazil, right? Okay, so in Argentina, so we can see some disruption, some political scandals coming out of the capital of Brazil down here. We have a Jupiter line running through Africa. Africa is going to be involved in a lot of trading activity over the next year. Um, we have a Mars line, so there'll be conflicts in Norway, Iceland, Sweden, uh, Ukraine, obviously, and way over here into Turkey, Egypt, down into Sudan, down into Yemen and also uh, into back up into Ukraine, back up into Syria, back up into Iraq. Um, there's a Mars line just abutting Saudi Arabia, and Israel's sort of like right in the middle of these moon and sun lines. So there could be a shift in governmental policy in Israel and also a shift in governmental policy in uh, in these states over here. So I'm expecting to see some, not revolts, but protests or domestic uprisings in these parts of the world over the next year or so, and even maybe in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, which sounds surprising, but that's possible. The other part of the world where there's a lot of conflict, and this will actually show up probably next to October, probably in October, is essentially um, Eastern China down into uh, Taiwan and down into the Philippines, Australia, Indonesia, and also into Japan and Korea. So those are the parts of the world I would pay attention to. Also, Mars is showing some um, increased aggression, especially down by Tasmania and down by the Far East Coast. And there will be some reforms in New Zealand over the next few months. Okay, so let's get back to this chart for the next week for you folks. Um, and I'll go on the year chart so we're going to go to the now chart. So that was the eclipse chart, but basically that was essentially um, the Hindu New Year chart isn't going to be radically different. So let's go here. Let's go to the now chart. All right. So for most people, they've been a little bit confused about economic direction over the past few months. That'll abate by around April 9th when Mercury turns to direct, but there'll still be a little bit of confusion really until I would say around the end of April. Um, for Aries, Aries has Jupiter in the second house. So again, good for financial growth, but again, excessive spending. Mars is in the third house, so this sign will be very aggressive in terms of how it pursues its goals. Ketu's in the sixth house. You'll have to watch out for financial issues and also health issues. Moon is in the ninth house, good for financial growth, and Saturn's in the 11th house, so slow financial gain is indicated. But again, you have to watch the pocketbook. For Taurus, Taurus has Jupiter in the first house, which is generally good for the sign. It gives financial growth from unexpected sources. And Mars is in the second house, so there'll be some aggression coming out of the sign, some harsh speech. Ketu's in the fifth house. That can give some problems with kids. Moon is in the eighth house, so again, wife will be moody or difficult to deal with. Saturn's in the uh, 10th house, so good for career life, but only for a few more days. And it'll give financial gains, so when it enters the 11th house around March 30th. Um, we have a significant transit occurring next week, and that's the Saturn transit into Pisces. So uh, prepare yourselves for that. Mars sits in the first house for Gemini. Gemini has some fame or but also some financial worries because of the 12th Lord sitting in the 10th house, along with Mercury and the Sun and Rahu. So the government's getting greedy with this sign. Ketu is in the fourth house. Again, some disruption to domestic harmony. Relationship life will be a little bit unstable or a little bit uncertain because of the moon sitting in the seventh house. Saturn's in the ninth. That gives good luck, but you have to go slowly. And again, there's increased risk of debt for this sign, especially connected with career. So just be careful. And some reputation, some assault on reputation as well for Gemini. But again, this doesn't necessarily have to be serious, and it does depend on which major planetary period you are currently in. So again, these are general significations, not specific. Okay, so if you're a Gemini sun, don't worry, don't stress yourself out. Um, Cancer has um, Mars in the 12th house, so again, there's a risk of being abused or used by relationship partners. So Cancer should be careful about that. This sign does have a lot of confidence, though, and it has Moon in the sixth house, so it can give some stomach or dietary problems. Saturn's in the eighth. It can give some chronic kinds of issues, which will be relieved within about a week or so. Um, Venus, Mercury, Sun, Rahu are in the ninth house. That's actually good for financial gains for this particular uh, sign, sun sign or rising sign. And Jupiter's in the 11th house, which again is good for financial gains. But again, watch out for relationships. Don't get attracted to the person just because they're pretty or they flatter you a lot. Uh, it's not an easy time for Cancer over the next 3 months, or over the next 6 months, to be honest. For Leo, Leo has Ketu in the second house, so some difficulty being understood, or people deliberately misunderstanding you. Moon is in the fourth house, is in the fifth house, so some changes of luck. Luck will basically be on your side. Saturn's in the seventh house. This does indicate some opposition or resistance from opponents. And like I said, a lot of behind the scenes manipulation and attempts to subvert what you're trying to do. Uh, 10th house has Jupiter in it, though, so ultimately you'll succeed in what you're trying to do, even though you have this particular combination in the eighth house. And Mars is in the 11th house. So essentially, whatever you set your mind to, you can do over the next few days. There will be a challenging period over the next couple of months until July. Okay, so just to be honest with you. But after July, you should be in really, really good shape for Leos. This is Virgo, Ketu's in the first house. The Lord of the first house is debilitated, it's very weak, so it's difficult in terms of forming relationships or working with people. Saturn's in the sixth house, and this particular combination is not necessarily a bad combination, but it does give some obstructions at work. And Moon is in the seventh house. I think overall from this chart, you have a very strong potential for financial gain through family members, and also Jupiter's in the ninth house should give some potential for financial gain over the next couple of months. It's just in this period where Saturn is will tend to restrict employment opportunities for you. Libra has no planets in the first house. Its Lord is exalted in the sixth house, along with Rahu and along with Mercury. It's a sort of a perverted Raj Yoga where it will give gains through effort uh, uh, and through attention to detail and through hard work, but it will also give delays because of the Mercury retrograde. Saturn is in the fifth house. That's been a good placement for the sign. Saturn moving into the sixth isn't necessarily bad either. It will give you the ability and strength to overcome adversaries. Moon is in the third house. There is some desire to change career or move out of a certain career, but that will be temporary. Jupiter's in the eighth house. Unexpected gains. Mars is in the ninth. It will soon be in the 10th, and that will give financial gains through work. K2 in the 12th, again, unnecessary spending, sort of the same as Aries rising. For Scorpio, Scorpio has no planets in it. Mars is in the eighth house. Scorpio is aspected by Jupiter. Moon is in the second house. If we put that all together, it indicates help from women and also help from advisors, from business partners. Saturn is in the fourth house, so there have been some delays or some home obligations, which will translate into earning opportunities within the next couple of weeks because of Saturn entering the fifth house. So a lot of the effort you've been putting forth from this particular chart will actually start to manifest over the next couple of weeks. Let's see now. K2's in the 11th house. Again, do not trust your friends until July. That's really the main thing. Just don't trust them. For Sagittarius, the moon is in the first house, indicates change for this particular rising and sun and moon sign. Change in perspective after a relatively destructive first couple of days. Saturn's in the third house. Again, a strong willingness to succeed, but this will also bring family obligations within about a week. Jupiter's in the sixth house, so a lot of effort to make change and a lot of effort to institute reform. Mars is in the seventh house, indicates opposition from relationship partners or uh, just open opponents. K2's in the 10th house, so there will be disruption or breaking down of existing systems in order for this sign to make progress. Capricorn is is the next sign we're going to be looking at. The Lord's in the second house. Pretty soon it'll be in the third house. It'll be in the cluster with all these relatively well-placed planets for this particular sign. Should be a good period for business, although there may be some minor slowdowns. And Saturn will be aspecting Jupiter, so that will actually mitigate losses. It will actually slow down losses. Mars is in the sixth house. This sign will be very aggressive and very forceful, and it will start to take more aggressive chances over the next couple of months, shortly. K2 is in the ninth house. Unexpected twists and turns in luck. So I wouldn't invest in cryptocurrency right now, just my own bias. And Moon is in the 12th house, so business partnerships can be worried about losses and financial setbacks, but that'll shift within about a day. Saturn is in Aquarius. Right now, it won't be in Aquarius much longer, for about another week or so. And Saturn will then shift over to Pisces. It will get more focus on financial gains, more focus on money. And be done in about 5 minutes.
What?
I'll be done in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, what it done?
I'm just finishing the chart.
Oh, just now?
The show.
Oh, the show.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. All right.
I'm gonna call Stanley, find out what time he's gonna be home.
Okay.
And then I can call Brian.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Bye. Sorry for the interruption. I'll let you know I'm living in the real world. Uh, and again, I'm horribly unprofessional, and I apologize for that. But this is me. This is not. This is sort of the way I've always been. And so I do respect you. I do value you, but my life tends to take these unexpected breaks. So Aquarius, a lot of focus on financial gains, a lot of focus on wealth. Jupiter's in the fourth house. Again, not a bad time for taking up educational activities. Mars is in the fifth house. Good for luck over the next couple of months, actually. Mars leaves the fifth house. You'll be working on yourself a lot over the next 2 months and improving your skills. And K2's in the eighth house, a lot of interest in odd or unusual subjects. Moon is in the 11th house, good for financial gains for Aquarius. Okay, let's move into Pisces, which has this large cluster of planets in it. And this can cause some problems with reputation for this sign, some confusion over direction in life. It's not necessarily a bad placement. A lot of opportunities actually come in if you have this particular placement, but they'll also require a lot of work as soon as Saturn enters that sign. So again, expect increased financial growth for this particular sign, but also you'll have to watch out for your reputation and not take shortcuts. That's the only warning I have for Pisces. Jupiter's in the third house. You'll automatically give strong desire for gains. Mars is in the fourth house. Some difficulty with the relationship life, which will pass within about a couple of weeks. And K2 is in the seventh house, so relationship partners will still seem a little bit distant or detached for a couple of months. Moon indicates a change in direction in career, and Saturn in the 12th house here going into the first house indicates an end to losses and an end to health issues for Pisces. If we look at the world map, again, we'll go back to this for this chart. Again, we're seeing the same cluster of problems as we saw in the eclipse chart, but right now they're more focused on um, the eastern United States, Canada, Toronto, but also on Cuba, Florida, down through Virginia and North Carolina, and down through Venezuela, Peru, and Ecuador. Okay, so I didn't mean to enlarge that. I'm going to zoom out. Um, there are crises brewing in England, France, Spain, um, Algeria, Morocco, most of Western Africa, if I'm honest, and also Norway down through Germany, and whew, just this Europe's just kind of a mess right now, isn't it? With all these planetary lines. It doesn't mean um, there'll certainly be protests in these countries. And I believe this is close to Romania right here. This is where a lot of the anger is focused over here, and also into Greece, and a little bit into Turkey, a little bit manifesting into Turkey. And there's a Moon Mars line in Turkey. So, and also in Saudi Arabia, and also there's a Mars line right by Israel, close to Israel. So we should see some extra um, military activity down there, and also also in Ukraine. If we go over to Eastern Europe, we see this cluster of planets. We have Saturn, Venus, Sun, Mercury. So there'll be trade issues among all these countries like Vietnam, Thailand, um, China, uh, Myanmar, geez, just all over the place. India is left alone blessedly during this time, and at least this is the first time I haven't seen. There are some angry lines in the eclipse lines close to Pakistan and Afghanistan, but there are some more aggressive lines forming over Indonesia and Australia, and also over by Japan. So these may be connected with trade wars, they may be connected with military conflicts or small military interventions. So I would watch out for both those things in those parts of the world. But this is yeah, this is the cluster of French colonies I was talking about earlier. This is kind of a mess. So just watch that part of the world pretty carefully if you can. And also watch Eastern Europe and most of Europe because a lot of the issues affecting England and Spain and France and Germany are going to manifest pretty aggressively over the next month and a half. Okay, so that's it for this week. I love you guys. I do this all for you and also a little bit for me, if I'm honest. Please share, like, ask questions. I realize this went on a bit longer than I wanted it to, but I had a lot to squeeze in, and I'll cover the new year a little bit more in a little bit more detail next weekend. Okay? So that's about it for this week, and I'll also cover the eclipse. But again, it's usually a good idea not to undertake any major activities during an eclipse. So, especially the day of the eclipse, May 29th to May 30th, just, sort of meditate or chill out or just try to stay. I think the sanction against staying or the sanction about staying indoors is a little bit extreme, but if you feel really uh, worried by eclipses, then stay indoors. Um, and some people actually do better under eclipses than under normal conditions. And um, it's, it depends on what the chart is. So some people will be born with eclipse combinations in their chart, and this will feel absolutely normal to them. So, again, like I said, just be aware that uh, there's strong potential for disruptive elements all through April into May and June. Okay, but again, it's sort of a cleansing that needs to be done as opposed to something which is being done to punish us. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Um, so in order to make room for new things, sometimes you have to get rid of old things. Okay. All right. And look upon this as a time to explore innovations, learn more about investing, learn more about the world. Um, it's a really fascinating place, and it's not doomed irrevocably. It's going through change, and if life doesn't change, then you're stuck. Okay, so keep keep watching, keep listening, keep active, um, keep on doing what you're doing, and progress. And think highly of yourself. You do deserve your success. And I love you all again, and God bless you all. Thank you, and have a great week. Don't let the eclipses spook you. Bye. And I apologize for the delays.